Hi, I'm Deniz.
And I'm Tom.
And welcome to our podcast, Because We've Been in Your Shoes.
We created our podcast for you, our nonprofit colleagues. As nonprofit professionals with over 50 years of experience combined, we've led nonprofit hospitals, university programs, campaigns that have transformed cities, communities, and campuses. We're from Chicago and Detroit, and now we're in the Pacific Northwest. Our work has taken us across the country from the Midwest to Seattle, to Portland, California, and nationally. We've seen it, lived it, and have learned from it.
We've all been through a lot as nonprofit professionals, and we hear you, we see you, and we understand. We know you, too, are used to wearing many hats. It can be exhausting, but we come together with the shared mission to transform the world. Because We've Been in Your Shoes is a podcast for you, us, and our entire nonprofit community, sharing and learning from one another so we can continue to innovate and unleash capacity for good. We'll hear from colleagues and peers, discuss emerging issues in the sector, and provide you with key takeaways and useful tips to support you in all you do. We believe that people and philanthropy equal possibilities. Join us on the Because We've Been in Your Shoes podcast with new topics and special guests. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I am doing quite well, thank you. How are you, Deniz?
Pretty good. Well, it's kind of a winter wonderland where I am. The rain quickly turned into snow. How is it for you up in Seattle?
Well, it's not snowing, I can tell you that much. And Joanne, our guest, you all will get to hear and know. Joanne, up in the Pacific Northwest, it doesn't snow as much, but when it does snow, even if it's 2 inches, it really causes a lot of havoc. A lot of my friends, for example, in Chicago, that's where I'm originally from, they are always thinking about, but that's the ski area, right? You go skiing there. So how can people get so crazy with the snow? Because in the city, Portland as well, Seattle, it just doesn't snow as much.
Yeah, we don't have the salt trucks, and we have people from other parts of the world that live here too who aren't used to snow. So, but anyway, so let's go ahead and get to know our special guest, Joanne Wilson. Joanne works as a national nonprofit leader for a national animal rights organization as the vice president of advancement operations. And we also know that advancement operations is truly the glue that holds nonprofits together and keeps frontline fundraisers moving forward and raising all that money. So thank you for doing that heavy lifting, Joanne. I know that I value my advancement operations teams and their ability to keep us moving forward. Before we get started, I also want to share that I love your LinkedIn bio headline, Vice President, Advancement Operations, Direct Response Fundraising Professional, Caffeine Aficionado, and sun lover. And as we just said, we don't really get much sun out here in the Pacific Northwest as we have snow today. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the sun, and hopefully it's shining where you are. Joanne is Vice President for Advancement for National Animal Rights Organization based in Washington, D.C. She has been with the organization for nearly 8 years, and during her time there, her work has evolved and grown with increasing responsibilities, including managing teams and integrated marketing to sustainer retention and acquisition strategies to now overseeing advancement operations. Wow, that's a lot. That is a huge heavy lifting job. Prior to that, Joanne was an account executive for a nonprofit consulting firm and a telemarketing strategy firm supporting nonprofits of all sizes. She also has worked as a donor program manager, also with an animal rights organization, and started her career as a marketing manager with the Political Action Committee supporting women in politics. Oh my God, that's another topic I'd love to talk to you about. Her academic background is equally impressive, with both a bachelor's and a master's in international relations from American University. Joanne calls Maryland home, and one of her favorite things to do is gardening with her growing collection of chainsaws. Oh, God, we gotta. Oh, you are not just the glue, but you definitely know how to operate chainsaws, cutting things. So we got to jump into that. Well, thank you and welcome to Because We've Been in Your Shoes, Joanne.
Yeah, welcome, Joanne. I'm so excited to meet you and talk to you and learn more about you. So why don't we start by, why don't you share your background with the audience? How did you get into this field? How did you navigate it? We'd love to learn more about you.
This is the best story I love to tell people because it's also great trivia. When I was at American University, I was in graduate school. I had no idea that this universe existed of fundraising. Deniz and I have discussed
Yes.
that we don't know anybody in my generation, speaking of generations, that went to school for this. We all sort of fell into it from myriad areas. My graduate counselor said that I needed 3 internship credits to graduate. And I looked something up and it said development. And I said, cool, international development, haha. It was, I ended up interning for a women's political organization. And that's where I started learning about this fascinating world of fundraising. What? You ask what? And it was kind of a good fit for me because I had more recently been a bank teller and I was used to asking people.
Banking. Yeah.
Yes. I'd been asking people, hey, would you like to upgrade your account to this? I was doing a little bit of light sales work as part of
Upselling.
Yes, correct. I hear you don't have to do that anymore, and I'm really mad. Yeah, so that's how I fell into this, and then a position opened up while I was in my last semester of grad school, and I just never left. I stayed at that organization for close to 6 years, then moved along. It was just time for me to develop my career in other areas, and I still love those very early years because I still have friends that I made. That was 18 years ago, almost 19 years. A lot of friends in the industry. I've been supervised by the same person more than once because we're all just popping around in the DC metro area. And I have learned so much. I have traveled to parts of this country that I otherwise would not have. And it's great because at that organization, we were given a lot of opportunity to volunteer for voter turnout operations, which meant that I have been to Florida, South Carolina, South Dakota, California, Ohio, and I'm sure I'm missing a few others. And then for work as well, I really value one-to-one communications with the partners that we use to do our work. And so I've been able to travel to Pennsylvania, to New York, to California again. And it's just been a wonderful 18 years in the business so far.
Wow, 18 years. That's great.
That is, wow. That's incredible. I mean, with that background, elaborate a little bit about your personal story too, about what motivates you to balance the work that you're doing, and a little bit about the chainsaws, maybe. How does chainsaw and fundraising? I don't know how that, but I got to find out the tie. Is that hurt? Are we getting early into our mental health question about how you de-stress?
No.
But
a little bit. Growing up in the Caribbean, the girls had to clean the house. I hated every moment of it. And to this day, one of the first things that I was able to do once I was able to afford to do so was hire someone to come clean my house for me once a month. So she comes in and she does that heavy work, which frees me up to do. I look outside very frequently. I just hung a bird feeder right outside of this window here. So I like to look outside and then sneak away, walk around my yard. My house sits on almost a half an acre. And I discovered that I like digging things up. I like chopping things up. I like planting things randomly and seeing them grow. When my ex-husband and I divorced, a chainsaw was left here, a really big one. And I felt really uncomfortable lifting that thing. So I never actually used it, but I have all of the chopping and cutting tools. And then one day I was at Aldi, this grocery store, low cost grocery store here, and they have an aisle of random things. And I saw a chainsaw and I was like, what? And I went back because it was $40. And I went back but it was on sale for $16. So it's a 14-inch chainsaw. And my partner, who's an engineer, and he likes to tinker with things, he looked at it, he made sure everything was good. And he said, go ahead and use it. He taught me how to use it. And I fell in love with it. And so I spent a few weeks this summer just chopping things down, pruning trees.
I need one.
Yeah. Oh,
because I like the garden too.
but wait, there's more, because I said there's a collection, right?
Yes.
I saw on Groupon, because I love Groupon, that's sometimes where I get plants, I found a 6-inch one that's about the size of a drill.
Oh.
Yes. And
They're that small? The petite version?
Yeah.
La
and
petite chainsaw.
Yeah, precisely. And it's also perfect for pruning small limbs on trees. And so I can't wait till I actually have a project that I can see from here that I need to work on. It's very exciting.
Wow. So you're really an outdoors kind of person. You mentioned something earlier about being Caribbean.
Yes.
Let's talk a little about that background.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Trinidad until I was about 18 years old. The accent comes and goes, but I've been living here far longer than I've lived there. In fact, next year I'll have lived here for 30 years.
Wow. Okay.
And I've never lived anywhere outside of Maryland because I really love Maryland. But I ended up migrating when I was younger. My mother migrated when I was about 12. And the agreement was, because this happens quite commonly, is that I would stay and finish school there and then move here. So that's exactly what happened. I still see my family very frequently. In fact, earlier in October, 2 of my aunts were visiting and they stayed here in my home for 2 weeks. And I also make it a priority because I have 2 children, 11 and 14, and they also love going there. There was a point where over the summer, in order to save the cost of childcare, while my mother was still there, my mother also retired and lives there off and on, she took them with her for 2 months.
Oh, wow.
And they were, my family, we call it the compound. There's one street where 5 of the houses, it's a very large family, 5 of the houses belong to us.
Wow.
So these were the most spoiled young people on the planet.
Sure.
Yes.
Pampered too, I'm sure. I'll do that for you. I'll take care of that for you.
That is wonderful. Wonderful news. Yeah, I'm curious about something else too. Let me ask you about the transition. You came here as a young adult almost, right?
Yes.
That transition is much harder. Talk about that for a second.
That, my mother's cousin, this is as I said, I come from a multi-generational family, which is why it makes sense for me to manage teams the way that I do.
Yes.
My mother is one of 10, but I was the first grandchild. However, one of the aunties who was visiting, she's only 6 years older than me. So in some respects, I was child number 11, because I was the only girl cousin for a really long time. And so for me, I was a babysitter, but also hanging out with the older aunties. And then when I came here, my mom had a cousin who was already living here. And one of his daughters was close to age and me. So we just started hanging out. And that made the transition smoother. And eventually I went online and started finding friends that were local. So I'm never going to be one of those people who has said, oh, no, don't go online. I have built wonderful friendships with people that I have met both in person and whom I have maintained online-only friendships. And yes, that includes you, especially. One day we will meet. We will meet one day.
Yes, we will.
And that's just coming from that kind of family and being that sort of flexible, having that sort of flexible way of meeting people. That helps me transition very easily in challenging circumstances, whether it's a new job or like one of the jobs that I was in that list, I was laid off from because they were making cost cuts. And it's just sort of you spend a few minutes, you make a plan, you get upset, and then breathe deep, move on to the next thing and transition. life is not easy. It's not kind to a lot of us. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, rolling with the challenges, because I don't look at them as punches so much as big challenges, rolling with those challenges it makes me a more resilient person. It also is an important lesson that I'm teaching to my two children about just life is going to come at you hard sometimes, and you just have to
Yeah.
understand that you don't have to fall apart. Just lean on your, build a support network, and then lean on them
Yeah.
when that time comes.
That's great advice. I love that. And Tom, I want to touch into your background too. I mean, you both have a Caribbean background. I have not really been to the Caribbean before. It's one of those places that is on my dream list. I definitely want to go visit the Caribbean. But Tom, I think that's, just sharing and hearing Joanne's background too.
Yeah.
You were born here though, right?
I was born in New York, and my family's Belizean. I've only been to Belize as an adult once. I am not a hot weather
Yeah,
person. I do
we don't like the colder
So-
it can be, Joanne.
Yeah,
You'll find him. I think Antarctica has a cruise
I've
trip
gone to
coming.
Antarctica.
Are you going next? He went to Alaska during the summer. He went
Yeah,
on an
so
Alaskan trip. That's where he hunts for the cold.
and one of the reasons I moved to the Pacific Northwest is because living in Chicago, humid hot weather, I couldn't deal with humid hot weather anymore. I just could not deal with it. And in 2005, I was like, I got to get out. And so in 2006, 2007, I came out, and I'm like, and I've been here ever since. Even to give you an example, when I moved to Portland for a job, that's a lot warmer than Seattle. And by a couple of degrees. And after a while, it's just like, I got to get out of Portland too, because it's
The Mid-Atlantic is not for you, my friend.
absolutely not. And if I go and visit 2 or 3 days, fine. You go inside air
2
conditioners.
days is the thing.
And the worst
Wow,
thing
really?
I've done
With a
conferences.
day dedicated to traveling back to the cold
Oh, yeah.
Northwest. Yeah.
And remember I went to Arizona for a conference over the summer. Obviously, you go there, is that cost is going to drop when you go to these conferences in Arizona and these hot. I would not leave my hotel. Just to let you know, I would not leave the hotel. It's just that I'm just miserable in hot, warm weather.
Wow.
Not happy.
Oh my. It's interesting. I don't mind it. So if I can come and get, visit with your aunties,
Yeah.
would be amazing. So I would love that. I have one of my my best boss. He's a Jamaican, and one of my former colleagues is Jamaican. So they're always like, "Come and we will take care of you." And I'm like dying to go. I wouldn't mind the heat, Tom, for a little bit. In the company of Joanne and special treatment would be awesome to see it there and to lay on the beach. I think I could like island and
Yes.
Caribbean life.
It's nice. It's nice.
And maybe we'll bring Tom too. You can just stay for a day.
He's not doing it.
As long as the hotel room or that place have air conditioners. In fact, when I went with some friends in Belize, we stayed on one of the islands, and we were staying in these huts. The huts had air conditioners. I never left the hut during. Only came out at night.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
well, now we know the sun lover
Yes.
part of you. Why you? Yeah. So Tom would just say non-sun lover. So that would be. So let's kind of jump into our topic here. Oh, we've gotten off to a very fun start. So let's talk about teams. We talked about your personal multi-generational experience. We know that our work is dependent on collaboration, teamwork, and specialized skills that bring people together. And we know that the number one thing that makes fundraising successful is experience. That really makes a difference, having a team that has experience. So share with us about our topic today that comes from your personal experience about building multi-generational teams. What does that mean to you, multi-generational teams, and what does that look like?
When we're in I have come from smaller organizations where the opportunity to manage people has been sparse. My first experience in managing was managing interns who came into that women's rights organization in the same way that I did. And so I built sort of my toolkit for managing people by having that one-to-one interaction. And I still keep in touch with a few of them. I think I managed a total of 5 young women, and 3 of them I still keep in touch with because they are in this space, and we run into each other at conferences. That said, as I moved up in my career, I used to think, I do not want to manage people ever. It is exhausting. And then I landed with a team of 10.
Isn't it
So
that when they say the thing you don't like, you're really good at? Isn't that the thing?
I
Yeah.
keep
You
seeing
must be really good at it.
I keep seeing articles out there about the best leaders are the ones who don't want to do it. And I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, it's because it makes us tired. So this team, the multi-generational piece of it ended up being a complete accident because I was brought along to supervise someone who was managing something that I was an expert in, telemarketing. She happened to be someone who was a baby boomer. She's the same age, a little bit older than my mother, in fact. And she was just sort of, this was the end of her career. She has since retired, but she was at the top end of the spectrum. And then all the way down to entry level, because some of the work that we do in terms of donor relations are people who are simply responding to emails. And that's building your career foundation is the way that I look at it. So I have a broad range of people who are starting, and I just graduated college. And although that other person has retired, I still do have someone who's older than I am, who is also a report to me. One of the biggest things that I always struggled with was in this supervisory role was, how much do I push someone who I know is older than I am, who has more lived experience than I am, to do the work that needs to be done? I struggled mightily with having to sort of take corrective action from time to time. I still do. With someone who's older than me, but I had to look at it very differently. It is we're all working together here. So in order to do the job properly, age is not important. It's how well are you doing the work that is part of your job description? How well are you working with our external partners, and how well are we working with each other internally? This is a big DEI focus for us at my current organization because I'm not the only person working with multi-generational teams. There's a number of us, right? Because we've got 700 people spread out geographically all over the place. So for us, we always have to be cognizant of the fact that when we're talking about diversity, it's not just around ethnicity at all. In fact, that's one tiny part of it. I also have to be cognizant of how age is impacted, where we come from, what people's educational backgrounds are. And that sort of filters all the way down to the entry-level folk who have a very particular way about them, this new generation, so to speak. They think and they approach work very differently. And I see that as sometimes a huge positive because I have learned from them how to set and maintain boundaries with work.
True that. Yes, I agree.
Tom's 100%. All about the boundaries too.
Oh yeah, and let me ask you something that you mentioned earlier, and I'm thinking about a lot. So to give you where I'm coming from, I've never been supervised by a person of color, and I have never supervised people of color. And I've been in the field for close to 30 years. So I'm curious about yourself. Have you ever been supervised by a person of color, or do you supervise or have supervised people of color?
Yes and yes. My first, oh gosh, I have to dig deep to remember who was the first one in this industry. I think it was when I was at my first consulting company. I was remote, as was my supervisor, and she was a woman who was slightly younger than I, and she was of Asian descent. And that was the first one, and I had been in the industry 10 years before that happened. After that was for about a year or so until she moved on to a different role. And the first time that I ever supervised a person of color is with this current team.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay. And
Yeah.
did you recruit this team?
Yes and no. Some of the people who are currently here are people who've been here for a few years, but we have had to recruit a few people. And for me, what I'm looking at when I have a job description posted and I'm hiring, we have an algorithm here that says whether they'll be a good fit for the job description, and there's a percentage, and I never look at it. I look at the experience that they have listed in their resume.
Oh,
I don't
awesome.
even look at where they went to school. I sometimes blank on the name as I'm looking at this thing, and I'm just like, oh, because I was given
you're
chances
amazing.
in this industry in very much the same way. Oh, well, you want to go try this? All right, come try it. And you either are going to succeed or it's not going to be the job for you. And so for me, I go about it the same
And that's
way.
okay.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Skills are translatable. U.S. foreign policy has nothing to do with advancement operations. Yet here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are.
But keep going.
Yeah, so I ended up with one of the most diverse teams. 6 of the 10 people on the team, myself included, were people of color. But it was purely by accident in terms of selecting them for an interview, and they interviewed the best. So, all right, the job is yours. That has nothing to do with this color blindness that people like to say, because color blindness it ignores everything. It ignores all of the principles of diversity and equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
It's more like I am looking at people in a way that is what they want to tell me about themselves. And if that works, then that's the person that I bring in on the team.
That's great.
I would love to just even get interviewed by you just to see how, because it's interesting you say that, just because those skills are transferable. And, we're talking about multi-generational teams, and you highlighted that, working with team members that are younger than you, that you're learning from them. And so that's pretty interesting just to get into your mind about the kind of team that you're building, what you're looking for in the quality, and then how do each skill sets and lived experience complement each other on your team too. I mean, that's part of it as well, because you don't want to have, and Tom's talked about this, you don't want to keep hiring for the same person with the same skills. And so that lived experience and professional experience, you want to have specialized skill sets that complement each other. So
I would agree with the skill sets, but one thing that I think that the audience need to hear and understand too, hiring someone with high-level skill sets, low-level skill, wherever it may be, is also about the relationship you have with your supervisor, right? That supervisor must take the time to integrate that person into the organization.
Yes.
And sometimes that does not happen. What happens is that, I've been at fault as this as well. I hire someone, I'm like, go. We cannot do that. For them to be successful, we know we have to spend the time. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I have also been guilty of that. And it's something that I learned. I tend to pick up a lot of my supervising skills from bad experiences that I've had. And I've had a few, and I've made more than my share of mistakes. So we now have an onboarding checklist for anyone who joins the team. The company used to do an orientation cycle that was at 30 days and then 90 days. And at 90 days, you sat in a room for a week and then you enter. It was very boring. We would all sit, talk, and learn everything about there was to learn about the people who did the different programs and campaigns in the company. And it was awful. But one of my direct reports and I, when he started a couple of years ago, we started doing an onboarding thing. Any new person, we made a list of all of the departments with whom we interact. And I send around an email of introduction to the head of that department, and then have them invite the new person to participate in their department and team meetings so that they understand at a very basic level how people are working together and how that fits in with what our team goals are. And then after that, we now do something. I meet with my 2 direct reports every week. It's their time. Have an agenda, don't have an agenda, but we get caught up on what their projects are and how their lives are doing. Once a month, the 3 of us together, because we are now leadership of this team of 10, we get together and talk through challenges that we're seeing with the team.
Okay.
Every other week, the whole team comes together. They're responsible for the agenda. If they say we don't want to meet, we don't meet. But then most of all, on a quarterly basis, I have a one-to-one meeting with everyone. And that's just within my team. But we also make sure that we are constantly talking to everyone else so that we are collaborating better. Advancement operations, as Deniz has noted, is really one of those things that holds the glue of the company together. We don't get very far if the glue is hardening and it's starting to crack and we're not fixing the cracks. So relationships are very important to me. That means that within the team, those relationships are important, and with other departments, those relationships are important. We don't have to like each other, but we do have to work together. And so there is sort of an attitude. I was accused of being a mama bear at my team retreat, which is not always a good thing. But
So you must have had a really open, honest team retreat.
oh yes, we did.
Yeah.
What
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm constantly asking people, how can I serve you better as your leader? Because sometimes, new people will come on board and I'm sitting there telling them, go forth and conquer, but I'm not talking back to them to see how did that go? What did you learn? What can we do better? A big piece, and I'm saying all of this as though I've always practiced this. This is something I've learned in the last 2 years, to be honest. It's a big thing for us to always be talking to each other. And what has happened as a result of this is that my team is split up into 2 arms. One is a fundraising arm and the other is not. It's a support group. That's the word that I'd like to use. The support group and the fundraising group know what to do and how to do it with each other. And most importantly, they lean on each other for moral support when things start to crumble a little bit. And most importantly, we're thinking very differently about, what is my career path within this company? I'm sitting here answering the phones and opening mail and talking to donors. Where am I going to end up with that? Well, interesting. You could be me, because that was part of my job when I first started. I had to talk to people on the phone. It was sometimes not fun. Sometimes they yelled at you, but sometimes there were just lonely people who wanted to talk to somebody for the day. And I had some wonderful conversations with people who were just donors calling in to say hello. They've also learned that you can be a major donor person just because you are talking one-on-one to donors. They might say something or they might make a bigger gift because you were extra kind to them on a day that they needed it.
Yeah.
And I tell them I started as an intern and I didn't know what I was doing. Here I am. Your career is what you make it. I also have no ego if someone wants to go. This just happened last week. He said, I think that major donor fundraising is what I want to do. And I said, okay, well, go talk to our VP of philanthropy and ask her if she were to give you career tips, what should you do to build that foundation? Because I don't think that people should be sitting in the same job toiling away in obscurity for 25 years
I love that you said that.
when they've got options.
Well, we're multifaceted. I mean, just as you kind of shared you love being outdoors in your garden. You like tackling big projects outside. It, allows you not to just kind of unplug from what you're doing, but it demonstrates you're multifaceted with your interests. And, our jobs have to be just as multifaceted. This is such a great conversation, but you'll have to tune in to the next episode for the conclusion. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Because We've Been in Your Shoes.
Join us next time as we share, advocate, and highlight experiences and ideals from nonprofit colleagues, leaders, and champions.
Subscribe to Because We've Been in Your Shoes podcast and be the first to hear our new episodes introducing new topics and guest speakers. Remember, nonprofit friends, you're not alone because we've been in your shoes.